Okay, so this is Casper. This is going to be an overview of the Casper protocol. This is something that is almost finalized. There's just like little magic numbers that need tweaking, but it is like straight off the press. So this is the raw and unedited, possibly too technical version of Casper. And the reason why that is because the kind of nice conceptual tricks that we can use to visualize this stuff may not exist yet, but I tried to do as best as I could. So let's, without further ado.
Quick question first, Carl. Do you prefer people hold off on their questions at the end? Just note it while they're talking, or just ask interactively?
Great question. So I would say if you have a burning question, definitely ask it at any time. Also, I hope to remember to ask, prompt for questions after every like major topic, because there are going to be a lot of topics. There's a lot of ground to cover. I want to both cover a lot of ground and make sure people understand. So I'll prompt, generally speaking. So first, this is the hybrid Casper protocol. So it's going to start out with a proof of stake and proof of work at the same time. And so this is Casper, the friendly finality gadget. We'll understand what the finality gadget part means in a little bit. Now, this is kind of a 1,000-foot overview of what it's going to be kind of like as a user to use Casper without any understanding of how the actual protocol works. We're going to get into the protocol, but this will help. So first, a user deposits an amount of ETH to become a validator, right? I want to make some money. I decide it'll be good to be a validator. Once you are a validator, you're able to cast votes on what is going to be the canonical chain, and your vote is in proportion to your deposit. Next, you have validators which can withdraw your deposit. Once you've made the money that you want to make, you can withdraw your deposit after a certain quiet period. And now the quiet period is just basically a period in which we can discover things that you may have done wrong. So you can't essentially kind of misbehave and then withdraw your deposit and then you can't be punished. So that's kind of the reason for the quiet period. Now, validators will make money for converging on a single blockchain, but they will lose money for not converging or forming two blockchains. And so we're going to talk about all the ways validators can lose money. How they make money is pretty simple. So first, why are we doing Casper plus proof of work at the same time? Can be a little bit weird. Well, one is it will reduce complexity, and two, it will kind of provide this staged, slow removal of the miners. Now, the concept is if we did this whole big, now this fork has proof of stake in one go, then there definitely will be a massive split, and the miners will keep their chain, and the users will keep their chain. But this way, we can still reward the miners, but we reward them less and less over time, and we reward the proof of stake people more and more over time. So this is kind of the concept of why we would want to do the hybrid proof of stake, proof of work. So maybe any burning questions right now? Cool.
I have a quick question, Carl. How is a validator there selected to be the first one to put forth what a valid chain actually is? I know you said everyone's voting, but how is there some kind of random number generator to determine who's actually selected?
So I will, this is the next part. I will get to that in just a moment, but great question. So first, before we kind of get into that, let's talk about finality. So, and why proof of work does not have finality. So finality guarantees that that history will never be changed. So essentially, it assures that if I'm paid $100, then in the future, there won't be some kind of chain reorg, which means that that actually is not the history and I was never given that $100. And the reason why this is so important is because we don't want to have any kind of doubts in the user's mind saying, oh my gosh, maybe I'll write the smart contract, someone's going to pay me, but it could just be reverted at any moment. Like why, that's kind of the whole point of the blockchain is to reduce that. And there's a little fun fact, proof of work doesn't actually provide any economic finality guarantees. So what that means is it does not cost miners anything to, it doesn't cost miners anything to revert the historical trend, the history. So this is a point where I welcome people calling me out, because I haven't looked into the implementation of UASF. And UASF is the user activated soft fork in Bitcoin. It's this thing happening August 1st, whatever. But from what I heard from someone in, passing, is that UASF, if the UASF chain were to grow larger than the normal chain, it could be reverted. So these diagrams kind of illustrate it. You have the head is currently on the miner chain, or the miner's head is this chain, right? And the user's head is right here. But if the user's chain gets too large, and the reason why that the user sees this as the head is because they are only building a chain with SegWit enabled with the 4th bit flipped or something like that. I don't remember exactly how they're doing the soft fork, but essentially the users are only going to accept this chain. But the miner's chain doesn't actually have any rules. All they're following is like the longest chain, right? So if the user's chain were to get too large, then this chain would actually get larger than this chain. And all of these transactions that we saw, this is the old miner chain, would be reverted and now go into this larger user and miner chain. So first, if that's at all incorrect because there's an implementation detail that I'm missing, then let me know. But 2, this is something that generally could happen. For instance, if like aliens were to arrive on Earth and they're just really good at proof of work mining, they could erase all of the proof of work chains just by mining way more blocks, and they have no penalties for doing so. So any questions on that?
Hey, I actually had a question on the previous slide, if we could go back one. I'm not really understanding why proof of work provides no economic finality. Doesn't it cost $1 million to rewrite a chain $1 million back?
It does provide, yes, it does cost that. However, what it means is the miners don't actually lose an amount of money on like both of those chains, right? So it's like this, it's kind of essentially there is this kind of implied economic cost to building a larger chain, right? However, there is no kind of penalty for doing this reversion. And there's no real guarantee that if this reversion were to happen, that there is some kind of loss in profits. And the real place where this gets bad is, okay, it works if everyone's decentralized and all the miners are kind of doing their own thing. However, it doesn't work quite as well if you have if you look at it from a coordinated choice game theory kind of perspective, where the miners can form a cartel and they can choose, okay, we're going to dedicate 5% of hash power to this main chain that we're going to be publishing, and we're going to be building up this main chain. But then at the same time, we're doing this other kind of, secret chain, or, and then eventually we release that, selfish mining. It doesn't have to be very costly for them if they form a cartel. Hopefully that makes some sense. The whole coordinated choice game theory thing is something that the foundation is really looking into and kind of trying to understand how to defend against.
But it is true that if I mine on a chain and then a longer chain and I get some rewards, I don't have those rewards on a longer chain that everyone switches to in the future, right?
Yes, that is correct. However, mining on the longer chain is only going to be costly if you are not in a large cartel which controls most of the hash power. So if you already have a lot of the hash power, then you're able to revert or you're able to revert blocks because it doesn't cost you almost anything to revert those blocks. They're essentially, what we're trying to do is we're trying to create a mechanism with Casper which is resistant even if the validators form cartels, and like they form groups. Basically, when I say a form or cartel, I mean form a group of coordinating actors that decide on, you know, some single strategy in order to maximize their payouts. And this is something that is really like doomsday scenario. If, for instance, you know, the price of Ether keeps going to, you know, 10,000 and we get to a point where the governments are proof of work mining, right? If we have a massive coordinated effort by, you know, large, very powerful groups to kind of break a chain, it's not costly for them to do so at all. They just, you know, mine. It would require switching the proof of work mechanism. So hopefully that clears things up. Okay, so checkpointing proof of work. How do we get finality in proof of work? Well, we checkpoint. So for the first, you know, we're not going to remove proof of work. Instead, we're going to be providing finality checkpoints. And those finality checkpoints will be every 100 proof of work blocks. So we're going to call that an epoch. And a checkpoint can't be reverted unless at least 1/3 of validators' deposits are slashed. Now, what that means is if you have two conflicting checkpoints, which are both finalized, and what that means is you have 2/3 of the validators say one chain is the correct chain, and 2/3 of validators say another chain is the correct chain, then at least 1/3 of those validators has to have voted on both chains. And so you're going to be slashing at least 1/3 of the total number of validators. And you could technically slash more, you know, you could slash, you know, 2/6 or what. Well, that was a bad example. But anyway, so this is the Casper safety guarantee. Now, this is a kind of diagram I threw together to illustrate Casper's checkpointing. So on the right-hand side, you have the proof of work miners. They're mining, you know, mining their chains just as they were before. However, now we have this other group called validators, and those validators, they are deciding, they're choosing, okay, they're somehow coming to consensus around this block is going to be, you know, in the main chain, and then 100 blocks later, they're going to say, okay, now this block is going to be in the main chain. And then 100 blocks later, this is going to be in the main chain, and, you know, and so on and so forth till infinity. Now, this means that the validators, if they were to lie and they were to get two chains, right, some other chain coming over here, and then they were to like finalize a block, but instead it's right here, at least 1/3 will be slashed. And the miners, they're just building on the chains, right? So that part is pretty simple. And remember, every epoch, this is what an epoch is. So an epoch is the distance between two checkpoints, basically, right here. So any questions on this diagram, actually? This is an important diagram.
After miners, sorry, go ahead. After how many blocks will this checkpoint be done? Because at the moment, at the 100th block, it's there might be still uncles. Will it take a few blocks until the 100th or the checkpoint is made?
Yes, exactly. So the validators, they are only rewarded for converging on a single chain, right? So now all of the validators are going to have their own logic for how to kind of, you know, they're going to guess that this block, instead of, you know, for instance, you know, some other block over here, is the actual block that they're going to start converging around. And the way that they can do that is at least one way is just like wait until there are, you know, X number of blocks above it, and then, you know, create a checkpoint here, right? They basically wait for the proof of work to provide some kind of guarantees around the block.
Cool, thanks.
So will there not be a standard way of looking at it?
So this is essentially the difference between like maybe a Geth implementation or a parity implementation, or actually even more complicated, because you can technically have any kind of logic for how you decide to commit or prepare. We're going to go into those messages, but how you decide on which chain you're going to start backing, right? This is up to you, and it's really up to it's a kind of heuristic based mechanism where it's probably going to be evolving over time, because you can definitely see a group of validators running some software, and that software is designed to, you know, be nefarious and trick other validators into validating the wrong chain, right? So you're going to have this kind of constant battle to make sure that these validators are, you know, definitely, like, almost always choosing the right chain. And that's something that can definitely be done. It just requires a little iteration. But that's kind of the complexity in becoming a miner, or writing mining software for Casper. Cool. So some fun attacks. What if miners censor all the validators' transactions? Well, the validators can actually just say, I don't care about you proof of work miners. We're going to form a coalition, and we're going to coordinate to build our own little proof of work chain and just validate that one. And because Casper is going to take precedence over the proof of work chain, the proof of work chain is definitely more of a secondary citizen, in that, like, it's still going to be super useful, but if the miners ever get really angry, they're like, oh my gosh, I hate this proof of stake stuff, and they all get together to kind of censor, then there is this kind of mechanism for the validators to fight back. Now, validators could censor other validators, but we're going to examine kind of what will happen with that later on. And the kind of thing to know is validators are definitely in charge. So Casper messages. There are two messages: prepare and commit. So yes, this is where it may get a little technical, and you can just kind of get a sense for how this stuff works from this, but maybe look at it again when I had to stare at this for many hours. So a prepare has an epoch, a hash, and an epoch source. What that means is we have, this is one example of a prepare, right? So there's the epoch, epoch 2. So this is, I didn't actually write it, but this is epoch 1, this is epoch 2, this is epoch 3, etc. So prepare epoch 2, the hash, so you can see the hash corresponds to this hash for this block, and it's referencing epoch 1. So this is kind of, prepares are what build the chain, right? If you think about it, for you to have a chain, you need to have the current block and then the previous block, or in this case, the current epoch and the previous epoch. So this is kind of what prepares do. We're going to go into more detail, and then there's only one other kind of message. Well, never mind. Sorry, one other thing about prepares. A prepare doesn't have to reference the previous one in. It doesn't necessarily have to reference the previous epoch, and what that means is I can say in epoch 3 reference back to epoch 1, and that is totally valid. And the reason why that is good is because it means that we can actually build the blockchain without getting finality on a specific checkpoint, but we can still keep going. So like, we don't want to get to this point where we build up 100 blocks and then the validators don't converge in time, and then the blockchain is stalled for 10 minutes, and then we finally they come to finality and we continue. We instead want to make it so it's flexible, and we can actually build a blockchain using the prepares, and these prepares can kind of span more than just one epoch. So the other consensus message is a commit. Commits have epochs and hashes. Essentially there's the rule where 2/3 of commits on a single epoch and hash means that the checkpoint has been finalized. So this is like the moment that we know that economics finality guarantee. We know that if 2/3 of people commit, then that block will not be reverted without at least 1/3 of validators losing their deposits. So this is very critical. This is, second epoch, here's the hash. Pretty straightforward, hopefully.
I have a question.
Sure.
Is it 2/3 of people, or is it 2/3 of the total deposits?
Awesome question. It is 2/3 of total deposits. Now, unfortunately, it's kind of hard to, I often will like go back and forth between saying 2/3 of people or because it's simpler to think everyone has the same deposit amount, just conceptually, but it is always going to be 2/3 deposits. It's your voting power, right?
Hey, wait,
So,
I have a question also. That's cool.
Sure.
So commits are for finalizing, right? So maybe I missed this, but like, what exactly are prepares for then?
So prepares do two things. One, they signal that a block is going to be or will eventually be able to be committed. And so that's actually kind of next up is we go over when you can commit and when you can prepare. But essentially what you do is conceptually speaking, you say, okay, all the validators are all in a room and they're all deciding on which blockchain to use. Now they can all say like, I'm going to prepare on this one. And so prepare basically means like, I think that this block is going to be the next, thing in that thing that we should finalize. And the previous block is going to be, the, epic X -2 or something. And what that will do is that will say to everyone else, they'll kind of start converging on the prepares. And then eventually if there are 2/3 prepares, then they'll start committing on the prepares. So the commits are more like, instead of I'm thinking that this is, it's going to be a validator saying, I am aware that the majority, 2/3 of validators think that this block is going to be the next block. So I'm committed to this block being the next block. I mean, this epic being the next epic. I apologize. If that makes sense.
If
Yeah,
you,
thank you.
If you prepare a block, oh, go ahead, Joseph.
Yeah, so, how does 0xBE here, how do we make sure that it is connected to the, block just like right below it?
Connected to this one?
No, not that one. The one that's, its immediate predecessor.
Yes. So this block is going to be in the blockchain, and there will be a smart contract, the Casper smart contract on the blockchain, which will have the history for all of these 98 blocks, or well, not all the 98 blocks, sorry. It'll have the history for this checkpoint, and it'll have the history for this checkpoint and all the checkpoints before. And the blockchain, of course, will have all of the blocks. So the Casper contract is kind of managing all of this.
Okay, so whenever you prepare, it can reference any epoch, but you still have to be it still has to be a chain, right?
Yes, it has to be a prepare which has gotten 2/3 prepare. So this is, we're getting into the next thing, which is kind of the meat of this consensus protocol, and that is the slashing conditions. And so this is what prevents two chains from being finalized. So economic finality means, I think we actually talked about this quite a lot. And so hopefully it makes sense. Now, there are 4 slashing conditions: prepare requirement, commit requirement, prepare commit consistency, and double prepare. So prepare requirement, we mentioned it previously, that's the 2/3 prepares on the previous, epic for the next one, and commit.
Sorry, Carl, can
Yeah.
you define slashing first?
Aha, thank you. Slashing means destroyed. So that's why I think I had this.
You did define it, yeah.
Yeah, so it will be when it is slashed, that means that those deposits are destroyed. Technically speaking, a 4%, at least right now, 4% reward is given to the validator, which proves to the smart contract that the slashing condition was violated. But I'm not really going to go over that in this kind of talk very much. It's mostly just, you can think about it, if someone misbehaves, then another validator who is aware of the misbehavior can prove to the smart contract that someone misbehaves and get a 4% reward and destroy their funds. So prepare requirement, commit requirement, we're going to go over all of these. So prepare requirement. This is epic source for each prepare must have 2/3 prepares itself. So if you look, this is the prepare message. That means that the previous epic has to have 2/3 prepare. So in this kind of example blockchain, you have this block, or this epic, sorry, each one of these are going to be epics now. I'm just simplifying it. Remember, there's 100 normal proof of work blocks between there. Now, this has 4/5 prepares, so both of these epics are totally valid, right? You can prepare on them because it has at least 2/3 prepares. Continue, continue, continue. This one has 1/3 prepares. That means that these two epics where people prepared on are actually invalid. And that's because this epic has not yet met the prepare requirement. So that is one basis. And that's kind of the thing that forms the blockchain. That's like, if you think about it, that's why we get this structure of, you know, this is the previous epic, that's the epic before it, that's the epic before it, because they're all built on this concept of 2/3 prepares. Next, we have the commit requirement. Now, the commit requirement is the stamp of approval saying, from the validators, I know that I've seen 2/3 or more other validators prepare on this epic. So here we have the 4/5 prepares. If I'm a validator, I can commit here. This is totally valid. However, if this is 1/3 prepares and I commit here, that is invalid. And when I say invalid, that means that I violated a slashing condition. And what that means is if someone were to take my transaction, all of these messages that are being sent are, by the way, transactions on the Ethereum blockchain. If someone were to see that transaction, take it, and then show it to the smart contract, the Casper smart contract, my deposit would be completely lost. I would be slashed. So that's the commit requirement, right? Requires more than 2/3 prepares to start committing. Remember, 2/3 commits means it's finalized.
What exactly is hashed? Like the commit message itself, or what part of?
Yes, basically you can think about it. The commit message is a little bit more complicated in the implementation, but you can think about it as all of this information can be submitted to the blockchain, can be submitted to the Casper smart contract. So this will be submitted and this will be submitted. These are the messages, and they are inside of the transaction data.
Hey, Carl, do the validators have to act at a certain time frame? Because if I was a validator, then I don't want to lose my deposit. And so basically, what's the incentive to act sooner rather than later?
Awesome. So essentially, as the blockchain is built, you actually lose money. And so it's a negative interest rate. And so what that does is that kind of hurts you for not committing or not preparing. And by committing and preparing, you can actually make up that negative interest rate. So you just you make money if you do this stuff, and you will lose money if you don't. So that's kind of how we can kind of guarantee that people keep preparing and committing. Once they're a validator, they're going to be losing money if they don't.
Hey, Carl.
Sure.
This is Connor. You mentioned that these prepares and commits are transactions on chain. Do they pay normal gas price fees for these? And is there any priority given to these transactions?
Fantastic question. And they pay normal gas price fees. And well, I mean, okay, technically, you could create a validator. You could create you could say maybe modify your Geth node such that if a transaction has, if your transaction is a validator that is trying to submit a prepare or commit, you could accept like a lower gas price for that transaction, technically. So it's not like, that's not in the protocol, but that is a possibility if you wanted to. However, there is no guarantee that people will accept your transactions. And so this is like transaction censorship. This is a problem which we're going to try to mitigate with a little bit of censorship resistance at the level of the protocol. But it's a very difficult problem, and one that is being actively worked on.
Where does the Casper smart contract pay the rewards from it, and where does it get the ETH that it pays out?
Great question. So this is a very small implementation detail, which I have been meaning to ask Vitalik. So I've been essentially the way that I have funded the smart contract is I just look at how many, what the reward is that needs to be paid out, and then manually increment, just like update the balance of the smart contract such that it reflects the amount of ETH that it needs to be paid out. But there are other ways to do it. You could potentially give the smart contract infinite ETH, but I would imagine that's a bad idea if the DAO hack was a bad idea. So
yeah, you might just like make it be the Coinbase every X blocks.
Yeah. Essentially what the Coinbase, I think all it does is just increment. I think implementation wise, that's what I'm doing a little bit. But yeah, it's good. Very good suggestion, actually. Cool. So prepare, commit, consistency. This is by far one of the most complicated and confusing ones. So if you don't fully get this one, that's okay. So you must never submit a prepare such that the prepare's epic source. So this is the invalid prepare. This is the epic source. The prepare's epic source is less than the commit, your last commit epic. So this is your last commit epic, right? Which is then less than the prepare epic. So that one. So as you can see, right, this is my last commit. This is my invalid prepare. And the reason why it's invalid is because I'm not including the block that I committed to in the block in the prepare. So what that means is, technically speaking, there are a couple situations where if you didn't have that rule, then you could finalize multiple different blockchains and not violate any slashing conditions. So that is, but I'm not going to go into those exact examples because they're just a lot to get your head wrapped around. But it kind of makes some intuitive sense that you wouldn't want to do this anyway, because the whole point is you want to reference in your prepare the last, your most recent epic that you think deserves to be in the main chain. So why wouldn't you, include your commit that you committed to? And that means you saw over 2/3 prepares. It's totally a valid epic, but you're just being, misbehaving. So this is another one. So if I did this and someone proved it, I would be slashed. All my money would be lost. And the final one is no double prepares. So if I were to, and remember, this doesn't mean that no validators can have different prepares. It just means that one validator cannot prepare on 2 different blocks for the same epic. So for instance, this is my first prepare, and it's on this block, and then I have a second prepare, and it's on this epic, and I have a second prepare on this epic. That's not allowed. Because then you can just start building up 2 different chains, and you're sunk. Okay, so that's basically that. Cool. So now providing availability. So we have this negative interest rate. This is the question about how do we make sure that validators keep validating? Why don't they just sit around? By the way, a bit of a side note: there is this. Well, I'll get to it later. Actually, never mind. So overview of availability concerns. It undermines the protocol if we're not finalizing blocks, right? The Ethereum blockchain is much more valuable if we were to finalize a bunch of blocks, and that should be reflected in the protocol rewards. So like finalizing every 20 minutes versus finalizing every day, it's like a huge difference for the users and what they can do, right? Maybe you can sell a house if you're finalizing every day, but you're not going to be able to, complete a billion prediction markets or something. And hopefully we can finalize every 2 minutes, right? So anyway, validators should also be paid in proportion to the utility they're providing in the blockchain. So essentially that means that if I am a, kind of dead weight and I'm not preparing and I'm not committing, I'm going to be penalized for not really contributing. However, we cannot differentiate between being offline and being censored. Now, this is an unfortunate truth. Essentially, what it means is, from the protocol's perspective, there's no way for, say, to like detect that the that the validator that's running the blockchain is actually censoring transactions. And what that means is, while we should pay them in proportion to the utility they're providing to the blockchain, even people who are preparing and committing could be censoring. So we have to penalize them as well. So the only time that we are not going to penalize is if everything is working smoothly. So this is a kind of chart, and this is the least scientific chart. This is just kind of to give you a sense, right? So if you're a validator, you can either do nothing, prepare, commit, or prepare and commit. We don't allow these actions, these black ones, just because if you're committing without 2/3 prepares, then you should be slashed. If you're preparing and committing without, etc. So first, this is the worst, right? We don't want, if you're doing nothing and we're getting lower than 2/3 prepares, that's terrible. At the same time, if you're preparing and still getting lower than 2/3 prepares, it's still really bad because we're not finalized. Here, if you're doing nothing and it's less than 2/3 commits, still it's like really, really bad. Preparing, it doesn't help. We're still not getting we're still not finalized. But the interesting thing is that even preparing and committing, it's still not good because we're still not finalized. And so it means that the users are suffering. When the users are suffering, the validators are doing a bad job. Now, the only times that we're good-ish, it's the only time that we're good is if we're preparing, committing, and there are more than 2/3 validators. That is where everyone will make money. So this is the kind of, there's no way to tell the difference between validators punished or offline.
A question. Do those losses get socialized? Because the order would matter if like this chart is
yes. So the losses are all calculated after the end of the epoch. And actually, here's the thing that I'm kind of leaving out of this, is the losses get worse and worse as the length between finalized epochs get longer and longer. So the longer it takes to finalize, the worse and worse the losses are going to be. And these losses are, in fact, socialized. You can have slight differences between, I'm a validator who prepared and committed, but the epoch wasn't finalized. So I'm going to be penalized a little less, but I'm still going to be penalized a bit because I could be censoring.
Question about this table here. So in the fourth column, third row, what does it mean? Validator actions, prepare, and then greater than 2/3 commits, not good. So fourth column, third row. Yep, that one. What does that mean?
So this means that if you prepared and there were more than 2/3 commits, so this is like, okay, the epoch is finished. We're looking back and there are more than 2/3 commits, but you are a validator who didn't prepare, then we're still going to penalize you because you're basically making it harder for the other validators. It means that there's this like pressure for the other validators to prepare, because there's always this threshold that if it's not met, if this 2/3 prepares is not met, then you're going to be, losing a bunch. Well, yeah, then you're not going to be able to commit. And actually, that was what I just explained, was if you did nothing for the greater than 2/3 prepares, greater than 2/3 commits. But if you did prepare, but you didn't commit, that's what this line means, then you're still going to be penalized because you didn't contribute to the 2/3 getting met. Now, take this chart a little bit with a grain of salt, because the actual chart is going to be a little bit more complicated and maybe better thought through, and it's a little bit in iteration. Vitalik has come up with an updated one. We came up with this chart in Singapore, but he's since kind of updated it with a lot of a couple differences. Yeah.
I have a ridiculous analogy, but I want to see if it's at all close. So if I so preparing but not committing before 2/3, would that be like if there's three of us and we're like standing beside the edge of a really cold lake and about to jump off, and I'm like, yeah, we're all gonna go, and I prepare and I look like I'm committed, but I don't jump in, and then my two friends do, like, is that like I faked everyone out by preparing?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yes. So that's actually an awesome analogy. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. It's like, I'm ready to do this, and then you don't actually do it.
That's helpful. Thank you.
I do have a question, guys. Maybe I'm not getting it right, but what's my incentive then in preparing and committing versus just committing, given that I can be punished in the case that there's less than 2/3 commits?
Your incentive for preparing and committing so which column, which box?
Sorry, I
think Gonzalo was asking about the fourth column.
Yeah, so
fourth item, which says okay.
Yeah, okay. So third column, fourth row. Yeah,
yeah. Okay.
No, fifth row. Yeah, that one. So what's my incentive in doing that, like prepare and commit versus just commit every time, given that if there's less than 2/3 commits, I can be punished, and the other one I can't because I just can't commit with less than 2/3 commits.
I think that actually this box maybe should not be blacked out, and that you should be able to commit. Okay, technically in the implementation, you can't really commit unless you prepare. But anyway, the reason why you would want to prepare and commit instead of kind of just committing or just preparing is because preparing and commit is doing more of a kind of social good. It's doing more of a good to the protocol. And so it's going to be penalized less. It doesn't mean that it's not going to be penalized at all, but it's your choice of, I have $100. You can either take $1 from me or you can take $5 from me. So I'm going to do everything in my power, if I really care about those $4, to give you only $1 instead of the $5.
Cool.
Cool.
Hey, Karl, when you mentioned the length of time passing before penalties are determined, is that measured via timestamp or blocks? And if it's timestamped, does that offer some kind of way that miners can, enact penalties sooner?
Yes. So if it was timestamped, you're totally correct that miners would have a bunch more power, although they still have a bunch of power. But this is all by block number, and it's technically time. When I say like a certain amount of time passed, what I normally mean is a certain number of blocks passed, and what that implicitly means is a certain number of epochs passed. And so like the difference between a long time might be considered 10 epochs, and that would be 1,000 blocks because every epoch is 100 blocks.
Great, thank you.
I just wanted to ask the same thing that Gonzalo did, to just clarify again. So when we commit, we always get the same, whatever you call it, reward, right? But if you prepare and there's less than 2/3 commits, you get kind of like punished. So what is the incentive for me to also do a prepare?
So if you do a prepare, then okay, so here's the thing, right? I have $100, and unfortunately in this epoch, we got less than 2/3 commits. So I have the choice there are three possible futures. There's a future where I basically did nothing, and there's a future where I prepared, and there's a future where I prepared and committed. Now, in the future where I did nothing, I'm going to lose $5. In the future where I prepared, I'm going to lose $3. And in the future where I prepared and committed, I'm going to lose $1. So no matter what, I'm losing money, but I'm losing less and less money the more of a good citizen I am.
Okay, kind of. But if I do commit, say that there's more than 2/3 that commit, and I do commit, what is my reward there? It would be higher than it would not make it would not offset the $5 that I would lose by not preparing. Is that right?
Here's the, maybe this is part of the confusion.
I guess the timeline is the thing that's confusing, at me at least, and maybe Joseph, because then it's a race to see who's last to do both things, right?
Yes, so this is, okay, so here's I think I've put my finger on the confusion. So this column represents an epoch where there were less than 2/3 prepares. So maybe epoch number 5 had less than 2/3 prepares. And so these are going to be the payouts for that epoch, for epoch number 5. Epoch number 6 had less than 2/3 commits, but it did have 2/3 prepares. So it had 2/3 prepares and less than 2/3 commits, right? So that's epoch 6. Epoch 7 had 2/3 prepares and 2/3 commits. And so that's this column. So these are totally separate epochs. This is one epoch, that's another epoch, this is another epoch. And these are the different possible, outcomes of that epoch.
Okay, I think our question is in epoch 7, all we did was just a commit. We didn't do a prepare for that one. So why would we have bothered doing a prepare on epoch 7 if we're okay doing it just a commit?
You make more money by preparing and committing.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Yeah. That was the yeah. Okay.
Yeah, we'll get more money, but there was a risk that it might not have gotten, epoch 7 might not have gotten 2/3 commits. Is that right? Before it can hit.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but if I were to submit a commit, then that means that I have seen 2/3 prepares. And so if I were to commit, then I'm basically taking no risk by also preparing.
I guess it's just everybody should just be waiting for other agents to act first, right?
Yes, there is a kind of who's going to do it first? Who's going to do it first? But if everyone kind of is too timid, then no one makes any money, and they, everyone's losing money, and so they just got to figure it out, right? They have to converge.
Okay, just to be perfectly clear, so if I prepare and commit, and there's more than 2/3 commits, I get more money than if I just commit.
Yes.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Great. So users can stake their ETH. If they break safety, they get slashed, lose all their money. The validators who prevent availability lose their money, and proof of work is slowly phased out. Success. So validator rotation, this is going to be super quick. There's a blog post on it, dynamic validator sets that you can read. Essentially, I'm not even going to really go into this. It's just too much. The rule is that if 2 epochs are finalized in a row, then the validators set is switched out. So like new validators can join, old validators can leave. Basically, the rationale behind that is in the blog post, just in the interest of time. Now, the final really important part for Casper is putting it together with a 4-choice rule. So here is the 4-choice. We have, the first one is to iterate over all dynasties to find the most recent validator set. So sorry, I don't know if I said this perfectly, but a validator set, specific validator set is called a dynasty. So right, there's like, if you think about it, it's a different kind of family deciding what being able to vote, right? So dynasty is a cool name. So first you go through all of the different validator sets to find the current validator set. So that gets you through, a large portion of the blockchain. Then you iterate over all the epochs looking for ones with more commits. And here, see, I said more commits, but really I mean the deposit size of the validators. And then we do proof of work. So in our, in this example, right, here's the most recent dynasty change. Boom. This is an epoch that, is a parent of this one, and there's basically no other choice, so let's do it. In all of these epochs that are shown right now, there's implied at least 1 commit. Actually, there's implied more and more commits, but anyway. So here I have my first 4th choice. I can say you know, this has 30% of the commits, this is 35. Okay, I'm going to choose this. Now I'm going to keep going. This has 35%. This is, you know, 35%. But now here I have another choice here, this one or this one. This one only has 5, but this one maybe has, you know, 45. So I choose this one. Now, once again, you know, this is 10%, this is 50%. Okay, so I choose this one. So this is basically how it goes until we find the head. Now, this is well, we're actually going to get into smart contract consensus. But now, lastly, we have the proof of work, and so that is, you know, done over here. And yeah, that's basically it. And technically speaking, these blocks, this one maybe didn't have to have, this could have just been prepared and not committed, technically speaking, I think. Yeah, I think so. Anyway, so
just a quick question: for what blocks will proof of work be done then, where it says proof of work for subsequent blocks till next epoch? Does that mean proof of work is done for all of those blocks till proof of stake is used again, or I'm still a little confused with that?
Yes. So this diagram, each one of these blocks represents the 100th. So this would be the 100th block, the 200th block, 300th block. There are 2 choices: 400th block, 500th block, 600th block. And that's, in other words, the first epoch, second epoch, third epoch, fourth epoch. So each one of these lines represents 100 blocks of proof of work that are being done. Technically, even, you know, the 100th block is a proof of work block, but basically the proof of stake is what is checkpointing. So these are the checkpoints, right? We're saying this block is finalized, and this epoch, you know, anything below this block is never going to be reverted, right?
Where does the ether go when it gets slashed?
It gets burned, pretty sure. Yes, it just gets burned.
So how am I not incentivized to collude with 66% of the validators and just shake out 33% every couple epochs?
So within the proof, within the proof for those 4 consensus rules, it was necessary to prove that as an honest validator, I always can make a choice which does not get me slashed. So there's no way for, you know, even if I'm one validator against a million, there's no way for them to force me to be slashed. However, they can censor me. But that's kind of the name of the game. Unfortunately, blockchains are very vulnerable to censorship. And that's, we need to be working on that. But if they do censor me, at least there is a little bit, you know, somewhat of a silver lining. At least if they censor an honest minority or then they will lose some amount of money themselves.
So preparing would not get you slashed, right? Like if we go back to that chart. So can you do this in multiple transactions? Well, I guess you would have to, right? Because prepare and commit are separate. So you would probably wait till there's like 2/3 prepared before you commit.
Exactly.
Okay.
That exactly. Wait till they're 2/3 prepares and then you'll commit. Cool. So boom, that's like the Casper protocol. We didn't really go over dynamic validator sets, but oh well. So we are running very close to 3 p.m., but there is a little, you know, other set which I think is very useful. So if you want to stay on, then please feel free. But,
yeah, just keep it running. People can, however much time you have is great. People can drop off when they feel they need to.
Awesome. So this is the kind of other side, which is how does this work within a smart contract? This is a little shorter. The Casper protocol is a little dense. So consensus in a contract. How are we doing this like Casper contract thing? Well, this is the general kind of separation of concerns. You have the smart contract, which provides the economic incentives, and it holds the historical data, aka the consensus messages. The validators, not in the consensus stuff, they have the fork choice logic. So they decide, okay, this is the fork I'm going to build on. This is the fork I'm not going to build on. And they also have the transaction sending logic. So that's the kind of logic which prevents you from you know, that stalemate that I was talking about previously. It's kind of the logic that says, oh, I'm going to be first and I'll prepare now because I think there's a bunch of people who will prepare, you know, whatever it is. There's then, so you have, computes, the smart contract computing the payouts, smart contract recording finalized hashes, and all the hashes actually that are ever submitted. The validator is going to decide which fork I'm going to build on and actually send the transactions. And remember, they are normal Ethereum transactions, just with the data field having those consensus messages that we talked about. So how do we do this? Like, it's so hard to visualize. And I think I've come up with, this is how I discovered like how to visualize this kind of stuff, because it makes no sense to me. Like, really, well, here. So imagine you are a smart contract, right? This is, the full chain is this. This is what the validator sees, right? The validator sees the full chain. But I'm going to be a smart contract right here on this block. Now, I can only see my history, just my little history. So this is all I see. So these are all the consensus messages that I can, you know, that I am aware of, right? Now, if we go on, boom. This is, I'm a validator, I mean a Casper contract on this fork, on this block. I can only see backwards. I can see everything that's happened in my history, and I just like can watch it like that. You know, continue on. If I'm a smart contract here, I can see this chain, right? Or if I'm a smart contract here, I can see this chain, right? So this is kind of, and now I'm here, right? I can see the full chain. So this is how the smart contract, this is all the smart contract can see. Now remember, it can do any kind of computation over what it can see, right? So it can see like, oh, in this block, validator number 30 should have, you know, did some bad stuff, and someone brought this to my awareness, and I'm going to slash them, right? So there is the ability for the smart contract to kind of act and punish people, but they are not able to clearly see the, you know, they can't see the chains that are not part of their specific history, right? There's only one blockchain. However, information from this blockchain can be put into this one, right? And that's what this kind of thing where I talked about, if you're a validator and you see someone misbehaving on a different chain, then you can just tell the smart contract, oh, he misbehaved. And now the smart contract will know and punish them. So first, does that, any questions on that?
I had a question. Since Casper is implemented as a smart contract, when it comes to the finality block, how do those commit messages get mined, so to speak, on that contract for the commits to be totaled up?
Great question. So the smart contract is going to receive normal Ethereum transactions. And these normal Ethereum transactions will contain the prepare and the commit messages. Then that smart contract can do its own calculation. It can say, based on the deposits of all the validators that I know of, based on the messages that I have seen, has block number 300 been finalized? And if there is 2/3 commits, then yes, that block will have been finalized. And that will be known by the smart contract. The smart contract will say, I know, I actually have the information for me to say, yes, this person is, or this validator is misbehaving, or yes, this validator prepared and committed, so I should, you know, reward them. So the validator, I mean, the smart contract can know, but it can only know stuff based on its history and based on all of the transactions in the, you know, mempool that could eventually be submitted to the chain.
Sorry, how does it know if we're just like concerned with this finality block every 100 blocks? Like, how does that 100 block know that the smart contract know the total amount of commits that have been sent if it hasn't been mined yet? It's like between the 99th and 100th block. How would it pick those up?
So you only start accepting prepares and commits around 33 blocks after the epic has started. So basically, you're right that like if you were accepting prepares and commits like immediately, then the smart contract wouldn't really be able to make judgments properly. But if you kind of wait for 30 blocks after the epoch has begun, so 30 blocks have been mined, people have submitted normal transactions, the blockchain's working as normal, as usual, but we have on the the 50th block, for instance, you have 5 validators submit prepare, and that prepare is and that prepare is in the history, right? That prepare was we are on block number 550. We're on block 550, and those prepares were for block 500. So the smart contract, let's say that this isn't actually an epoch. This is like, this is an epoch. This is the smart contract, right? Now, we are given a transaction, right? Someone sends us a transaction, and that transaction says, I prepare for this epoch, right? Now, me as the smart contract on block 550, I can say, okay, great, you prepared. And then I can get another one. Okay, now you committed. Here, I'm going to reward you X amount of ETH. Is the general maybe intuition for it, hopefully.
Can you explain the plan from this checkpointing to the full Casper, at least in a few words?
Yeah, sure. It's super simple. One possibility is instead of proof of work mining, validators are randomly selected to elect blocks. And the randomness comes from some kind of random generator protocol that someone comes up with, right? So that's one way. You can just have sample a bunch of different validators for each block. There are many different options, but that's one that Vitalik has explored, at least in the previous iteration of Casper. So one last thing. How does this relate to fork choice, right? If you are a validator, what is the easiest way for you to decide which fork to follow? Well, what you can do is you can actually run the blockchain and just start asking the smart contract what percentage commits they have, right? So like I'm a validator and I'm running the blockchain consensus rules, and the consensus rules say, the blockchain state transition rules, and the state transition rules say like, I need to, you're able to query all of the kind of history here very simply by asking the blockchain. Now, I'm a validator, I'll say like, how many commits do you have, smart contract? And the smart contract will reply with, a getter or maybe an event or whatever it is. Okay, I have 30% commits. Then we can do this again. We can say, oh, smart contract, how many commits do you have? The smart contract will reply or send you give you an event, or maybe have a getter saying 40% commits. And you can do this all the way through. And that is like probably the easiest way to figure out, oh, what is the proper chain? How can I do this fork choice? You just allow the blocks to be created, bundle up the transactions, and record all of the necessary state in the smart contract. And then you just say, smart contract, what is the chain that I should be following? And every smart contract at every block is going to give you a different answer, right? This smart contract is going to give you a different answer from this smart contract, or this smart contract, or this one. However, if you ask all of them, you'll be able to say, as long as they tell you just the proportion of commits that got finalized, the proportion of commits that were submitted, then you'll be able to make a determination, right? So here, 30% of the commits were submitted. And then you ask this one, 40%. Okay, now this smart contract this chain has 30% commits. This chain has 40% commits. Okay, I'm going to choose this one, just like we did with fork choice. And now we do it all the way here. So you just keep doing this, asking the smart contract, what is the real state of the world, or what is your interpretation of the state of the world? And then as a validator, you just ask all of the different possible instances of the smart contract, and pick the one that gives you the most favorable results.
And I can't, the reason that I wouldn't just commit to all of them is because somebody, like some other validators, will report on me and I'll be penalized.
Exactly. And so if you wanted to commit or prepare on one of them, and your prepare or commit violates one of those 4 slashing conditions, then a validator who see, oh, you committed on this chain, but then you committed on this chain, and that's, you know, illegal for whatever reason, then it would just send this smart contract, maybe in a block, maybe not this block, because of course you can't just kind of report it in the history, but you can report it in the future, and maybe the block over here will know, oh, this validator is actually a bad guy, right, and slash him.
So question about that. Let's say I'm a regular proof of work miner and I see one of these like proofs coming in where the finder gets a 4% reward fee for finding this.
Yep.
So I don't know the size of deposits, but I imagine it's going to be pretty large. So let's say like 4% is like 1,000 ether or something. There's some huge staker. As a miner, wouldn't I be willing at all costs to get that transaction in my block? And essentially, wouldn't that lead to like cartels of miners forming, like fighting over this proof of like bad acting by the validators?
I love this question. So absolutely, that is why the kind of like mining and miners being able to include transactions is maybe suboptimal. And we see the same problem in ICOs, right? Or token launches, excuse me. We see the same problem where if you have, right, like a fixed price, fixed cap token launch, then a miner is incentivized, if the valuation is smaller than the actual kind of market valuation, the miner is incentivized to just include one transaction that buys up the whole token launch. And so we have the same stuff happening here with proof of work miners. The only there's really this may be alleviated when we get to a situation where where we're not using proof of work between these two epochs. Instead, we're using like a random validator selection or something like that. It might be harder to game, but this is going to be a battle that we're going to have to fight to basically make sure that people who have the ability to make the next block have the least incentive to kind of selfishly mine that block.
Sure. Real quick follow-up question, if that's cool.
Sure.
So validators, if they choose to, for whatever reason, can fail to finalize consecutive epochs. And the fork choice rule looks for the epoch, essentially, that is last finalized. It goes to the last finalized epoch, essentially. So could validators fail to finalize on epochs for some extended period of time and then finalize, like say we have a fork and the miners keep mining here and validators don't finalize anywhere, and then finalize on the other fork that the miners weren't mining on, and essentially cause the proof of work miners to spend some huge amount of money mining on some chain that, and so there, it wouldn't appear, I guess it would appear they're degrading the protocol, but they could essentially cause the proof of work miners to spend some huge amount of money.
Yes. So this is why even with a hybrid proof of stake, proof of work, the validators are definitely in control. Like if they were to collude, then there would be ways that they would really be able to mess up the proof of work miners. You know, we can hope that because the proof of work miners are currently making millions and millions of dollars, that they'll, you know, naturally become, I mean, I don't know if we want to hope this, but, you know, they might naturally become proof of stake validators. And so they're not going to screw themselves over. But you never know.
Cool.
Finality is like really attractive feature, but even more so is like fast finality. So we worried about like a bad incentive where applications and users will be submitting transactions really close to that end of the epic period.
Then move closer to the microphone.
We kind of have like a really strong incentive to.
Can the speaker speak more closely to the microphone?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah, that's better.
I feel like there's an incentive to submit transactions like right before the end of the epic because you get that fast finality time. So like, are you worried about that incentive at all? 'Cause it seems like a lot of applications like follow the cadence of the epic and then try to submit like right before the end so they get that fast finality time. For instance, if you're trying to implement like a state channel. So yeah, that's.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's actually a really good point. And from what I told you, that is a misaligned incentive. However, there is one thing that kind of mitigates that, which is if you submit a prepare or a commit that is after the epic has been already kind of mined, like the next epic, sorry, after the next epic has already been mined, then while you don't receive the rewards for that epic. So you do have this incentive to like make sure your transaction gets in before the next epic, and not do that kind of wait it out until the very end or wait it out as long as possible and then submit all of your prepares and commits just to make a bunch of to have the most safe decision-making process because you've waited for everyone else basically.
Hey, Karl, are the rewards locked up along with your stake, or are they paid out during the entire process that you're staking?
So at least currently, they are locked up with your stake. So you have to wait, the kind of withdrawal period before you're able to, withdraw it immediately. I actually haven't personally thought about pros and cons of both options. Cool. So yeah.
I had a question then about the hybrid thing again. So around like blocks 1 to 99 is proof of work, and then every 100th block is a block that is done by the validators. Is that right?
Yes, although that block is proof of work mined, it's just that the validators start converging around it. Like they start submitting proof of stake transactions, including that block. It's not like a special block that automatically is mined or something like that.
So all the blocks are still being created by miners.
Yes.
Not by validators.
Correct. And so miners have the ability to censor transactions, but validators have the ability to change the fork. So there's this like little bit of a tension between the miners and the proof of stake validators. And the tension, I would say, is slightly in favor of the proof of stake validators because they can always collude to really mess up the miners. Like they just decide, okay, let's mine, let's finalize this block in an IRC channel because the miners are basically saying, no, we don't want proof of stake. We're going to kind of starve them and just build a blockchain without proof of stake. So that would be like the reason why miners wouldn't kind of aggress the validators. And the reason why the validators wouldn't want to aggress the miners is because the miners can, censor transactions. And without a two-thirds cartel of validators, the validators who are kind of a little bit at the mercy of the miners, if the miners are a cartel.
Yeah, I might have missed it. So miners are the ones creating the blocks. So why do they have to pay attention to whatever the validators are doing?
So the miners want to mine on the chain which most people are, paying attention to and like the correct chain, quote unquote. So the only reason why they would need to pay attention to what the validators are doing is just to like look, oh, what's the head? What's the current head of the blockchain? What's the correct fork? So they're going to use the fork choice rule, but other than that, they don't care. And unless your question was, why would the miners be afraid of the validators and why the miners wouldn't censor? The reason why the miners won't censor the validators, hopefully, or at least won't censor a vast majority of the validators, is because the validators could then collude as a cartel to finalize blocks that the miners didn't mine, and the miners would lose all the money. And that was something that was brought up previously in one of the questions as a possible thing that could happen, and it is a possible thing.
I have a question. So you're saying that one possibility is the miners keep on mining, and then the validators could collude and then invalidate all those blocks that were just mined, right?
Yes.
So as a person who's just using the Ethereum network, wouldn't you have more incentive to follow the miners, and then blocks never get finalized because validators never actually validate transactions, right? Or they don't actually mine blocks. So if the validators fork off and then all those blocks become invalid, miners can still continue going on, and there's no incentive for a regular user to follow the validators, right?
So the difference between, this will be implemented as a hard fork, which means that the clients are going to have to upgrade their clients to pay attention, to use the new fork choice rule. And the new fork choice rule will be looking at the validators, and they're going to be saying, oh, these validators say that this is the right chain, so I'm going to follow that chain. So if they implement the hard fork, then they're going to be following what the validators say. If they were to not implement the hard fork, technically what you can do is you can actually run the Casper contract on the current network without requiring any hard forks. But it just means that the Casper contract and the proof of work contract could technically get out of sync. And so there is actually in the roadmap a trial period where we just deploy the Casper contract on the mainnet without any changes to the mainnet, and we validate the mainnet with Casper. And if it gets out of sync, it gets out of sync. It doesn't really. No one's going to pay attention to the Casper contract. But once the hard fork is enabled, people will pay attention to the validators. And so your choice of the thing that you mentioned with the choice of, I'm a user, am I going to choose to follow the miners, or I'm going to choose to follow the validators, is basically the user choosing, am I going to upgrade to the hard fork, or am I going to keep with the previous version of my software?
So you're saying the client will be programmed to follow the validators by default, right?
Yes, correct.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Thanks.
For sure.
I have a more ops-oriented question. Casper is currently written in either Serpent or Viper. I'm not sure. Is that is the plan that it will is that how it will be published? And how many people actually know how Serpent works besides Vitalik?
Very good question. There is the current implementation of Casper is indeed in Viper, and Viper is a new language that very few people know. It is actually a really cool language, and I would totally recommend checking it out, although the installation process can be a little hairy. So that said, actually no, well, Viper's installation has gotten better, but there are plans of kind of just writing it in Viper, getting all the logic done, and then saying to the community, look, we understand that people use Solidity, and we want as many eyes on this as possible. Maybe the actual contract that goes out is going to be written in Solidity. But the truth of the matter is, the contract, it's 1,000 and some lines of code. It's not that bad. It could be re-implemented pretty easily. The real difficult part was just coming up with a formally verifiable consensus protocol that is proven to work properly. So in other words, long story short, it'll be potentially written in every language, and we're going to have a social consensus around which one is the right one.
Yeah, I think it's not the like the actual. I think people will be worried about the compiler and like sort of between the EVM and the actual the higher level language itself is where there'd be the most concern if it was published, if the Viper version is published.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Vitalik is still editing that compiler. Let me see if oh yeah. I think the, oh yeah. So I'll just quickly go. There's literally like one more slide. I was just going to say that this is kind of the tip of the iceberg when it comes to consensus in smart contracts. We are every, in my opinion, at least 80 to 99% of interesting projects that are going to be built on Ethereum will have some semblance of like consensus in it, and the concept of putting consensus in a smart contract is implicitly what we're doing with a lot of our projects. So this is not something that is just like, oh, this is consensus on a blockchain, and that's I can think that that's one thing and I'm going to work on my other stuff. This is like consensus on a blockchain is just the first most pressing application, but we need consensus on decision making and consensus on every other thing. So yeah.
Hey, Carl. So just zooming out a little bit, I see the benefits to Casper for economic finality. Does Casper have benefits for transaction throughput or block times or anything like that?
So with a proof of work, proof of stake hybrid, it is basically transaction finality. And the reason why we're starting out with that is just because it's a lot easier and it's a lot more straightforward. I mean, it's like a smaller change and we get to boil the miners, et cetera. When we do get to the replacing the proof of work part, then yes, we get better, potentially transaction, more transactions per second, potentially, more even reach finality faster. There are a number of different benefits. Maybe you don't need as many confirmations. I mean, it depends on how it's implemented, really. But you unlock a lot more when you make it full proof of stake. Cool. So any other questions about any parts or?
Just timeline maybe. When is this going to happen? And I think given the fact that some of the Casper long-term things are still in discussion, when is the idea to go for Casper?
Sure. So timeline without numbers would be first it's implement or finish a Casper full node and potentially deploy a Casper contract on the mainnet and start validating transactions and basically put some ETH in the contract just for fun and pay people with the Ethereum Foundation or ConsenSys or any organization that wants to kind of fund the smart contract. So people would get paid for validating, but there's nothing really behind what they're validating. Then next you would have a initial like hard fork, probably the Serenity hard fork, where you have the hybrid implemented and nodes running it. And that in that world we will have Casper proof of stake rewards as well as miner rewards. And miner rewards may be decreased, but not massively. And then over a period of number of months, miner rewards will be decreased and Casper rewards will be increased. And then eventually move to the full proof of stake. This now with kind of more tangible time included, what I am personally working on is I have taken Vitalik's smart contract and implemented the fork choice rule using that smart contract in PyEthereum. And I've also started work on and am nearly finished with a validator with basic validator logic. So this means like you decide I'm going to commit or I'm going to prepare based on whatever blocks I have received. Now this validator is just sending simulated network requests. So it's not really going over the network. It's just kind of, adding messages to a queue, and that queue is continually getting pumped out. It should actually be pretty easy to then take what I've done and put it into PyEthApp. And once we put it into PyEthApp, that gives us the ability to essentially run a Casper validator. And so whatever kind of timeline you think it might take for me to, finish this validator and then migrate it into PyEthApp, that will be the moment when we're able to first deploy the Casper smart contract onto the mainnet and start validating. Then maybe add in some extra time for a Solidity version of the Casper contract to be implemented. But then it's just a drag and drop, I can copy and paste change to upgrade that validator. So yeah, so that's, hopefully that gives you a sense for it. I'm thinking the order of months, definitely not years. Not the order of weeks, probably.
Cool. Thank you.
I have to go to another meeting. I hope it won't kill this and you can all get off in a sort of casual fashion, but thank you so much, man.
Thank you. As kind of a kind of future thing, I would love to do another one of these and then talk about like cryptoeconomics and all the things that I've learned from the Ethereum Foundation around cryptoeconomics and ConsenSys, because there's so much research that they've done and that is kind of just in their heads. Should be spread to the world.
We'd all love to, man. And I can thank you enough for doing this. I'd love for you to do more of this.
Awesome, thank you.
Well, and one thing I would add is the perspective that Karl broached the idea to Joe, and Joe was whole hog supportive for Karl doing it. So really, as Karl said, it's consensus. So be sure you let Joe know and others that there's a valuable cross-pollination effort, and Joe's quite willing to subsidize the ecosystem. It's quite clear, and it's a good thing. So let him know. That's
yes.
what I want.
Thank you, Joe. Cool. I will, I guess, stop share.
Yeah, I guess this is it. I'll stop recording then because I am the host.
Yeah, did anyone else have any other question for Karl?
Yeah.
Last question. Thanks so much for this talk. This was really cool. So Vlad's research on proof of stake is like very closely related, but tangential. How does that play into eventually where proof of stake ends up, and like what is he doing currently, I guess?
Yes, so I actually started out by kind of just talking to Vlad and learning about how Vlad is thinking about these things. Now, Vlad and Vitalik share the framework for how they're designing these protocols. So from like a cryptoeconomic side of things and from a conceptual side of things, they are like working together. And this is like, there may be a bit of a misconception that they're kind of working separately. No, they are definitely working together on this protocol. The actual consensus rules, right? Those are things that Vitalik came up with as a kind of let's get this out of the door before the Ice Age, or at least shortly after the Ice Age. Now, Vlad has just recently kind of come up with a bit of, I would say, a breakthrough personally, around using, he essentially created even simpler consensus rules than Vitalik that could potentially provide like really fast finality times and like really, really nice properties that like essentially coming to consensus without doing the checkpointing, just like doing it the whole time, possibly, we don't necessarily know. But Vlad's protocol is in the earlier stages because it hasn't yet kind of done all this like incentivization thought, and also dynamic validators. That's a whole like big annoying thing that, you have to think about. But that is kind of where Vlad is at. And so, I've basically been helping Vlad bouncing off ideas off of Vlad and him off of me with his kind of conceptualization of Casper. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, thanks.
Cool. Well, thank you all for listening. That was a lot of fun.
Thanks a lot, Carl.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Carl. Thanks, Carl.